Hello, it's Lotta Penny here. I wanted to talk today about the topic of taking the parts of yourself that have stereotypically been unappealing in corporate America and beyond, and making them assets. And to be less vague, I'll use myself as an example. I am queer. I am Mexican. I obviously am a brown Mexican, which actually does make a difference. Skin color translates when you're trying to ladder up in this world. And I'm female. And so 25, 26 years ago, those were things that I had to kind of hide as much as possible. I was not out. I never talked about my partner, and if I did, I was really cautious about how I referred to them by. I kept my hair long and straight. I can't change the color of my skin, but what I could do is I could become as much of a chameleon as I could in that world. And that also meant mirroring the behavior that I saw. And what ends up happening is that you do end up becoming more noticed in the wrong ways in your organization. And you start disappearing into the background, and that can go on for one's entire career. It was a bit of a survival tactic back then when I started in analytics, which was, some of my early career out of university. I was the only female in my industry at the time, and I'm not saying there weren't any, but certainly none that I had come across. And most of the men that I worked with were white cisgender men, and they were definitely a boys' club. And that's a very hard nut to crack if you're trying to work your way up a ladder, if you're trying to get noticed. You sort of have to play, and I say have to with a grain of salt, but you end up playing some of the same games that they play. And I sort of look back on my career and think about how I would have handled things differently knowing what I know now. But that is sort of how life goes, and hindsight is always 20/20, the old cliche. But what I can do now is I can take what I've learned and actually pay it forward for myself, but also for other people. So one of the things that I really don't shy away from, and perhaps the title of this video is a clue, is that I'm bringing assets to a team. So if a team is not on board with my identity, then I'm not on board with them. I can no longer hide who I am, nor do I have the energy or the desire to. I believe that someone's identity, even if it is not my own, is bringing something to the table because of how they grew up, where they came from, what they look like, how they, what sort of religion they follow. There's a plethora of ways that make us really different from one another. And all those things can be assets to your career. So as somebody who is a leader at companies, I really look for diversity on my teams. And so let's talk about what diversity means at this level. So diversity, I think, can be boiled down to race or ethnicity. It could be gender. We could talk about it at those base levels, but there's also more to it. Like we really, there are so many layers to what diversity can mean. And part of what I also look for is diversity in thinking. And I think arguably the way that I think and the way that maybe a white cisgender male may think, even though assuming we have the same exact education, that we agree on many things, we're going to have different ways that we've gotten to those agreements. And it is just how it works. And I think that that's a really beautiful thing. So what I do now is I really sort of wrap myself up in this sort of gift box for my future roles, and I start with it. It's in my cover letters. I don't lean into it so hard that this is all I talk about, but my point is that you are going to get a very unique kind of thinking. I am bringing a lot to the table. So I have my 26 years of experience. I'm a mother to 3 at various ages. I am a partner. I have ridden motorcycles. I've been parts of many communities, including the queer community. I've done a lot of global travel and work globally. I've done public speaking. I keep going on and on. There's a lot of stuff that sort of gets added to our roadmap of how we've kind of become who we've become. And so if we're optimizing ourselves and learning and experiencing, those are things that we bring to a table. And so how do you lead with that? And I think this is different for everybody. I don't know that this is something that everyone's going to feel comfortable with. I think you have to ease your way into it. And I'm in my 40s. So at this point, there's this beauty that comes with age where you just don't really care anymore if people don't agree with you or don't like you. I don't really care anymore about that. I want people to like me. I'm as kind of a person as I can possibly be, but not everybody's going to like me or like my personality or like who I am innately. So that's also a way for me to kind of weed out places that I don't align with. I can't work for places that I'm not aligned with anymore at this stage in my career. You're not going to get the best of me, but how you are going to get the best, how do you get the best of me? You get the best of me by not only embracing these aspects of me and knowing that they come in and they give a certain voice to the room, but that I am also thinking about how that looks across the organization and within my team. I like to also combine different skill sets as a sort of like a diversity group where I'm taking people who might be better at development and people who are better at creative and people who are better at marketing and sales and put them in a room together and have them work together. That is also a diverse way of thinking. And then you've got the other layers on top of that, which might be their backgrounds, their genders, anything. Ultimately, I get to use this sort of as a selling point for myself because we're still in a state where we're having to defend who we are, and we are having to deal with people who are trying to disempower those who don't look like them and act like them and believe in what they believe in. And so I'm considering these to be assets. In my dream world, it would be that I'm creating these diverse teams so that it's no longer something that feels like a new thing, like a new concept. And people can say that they want diversity in the workplace, but they don't really know what that actually means. 5 or 6 years ago, I was in a conference. I was at a conference and they had these breakout groups, and we got to decide what the breakout groups were. So we'd go and we'd say, I want to talk about this. And then people would go through the schedule and go, okay, I want to hear about this. And one of them was creating more diversity in the workplace. And when I got to that room, it was a packed room. And I actually decided just to be an observer because I was curious to know how people at this particular conference thought. And I'm sure it doesn't, reflect on everybody, but I did think it was a really powerful moment for me, and I reflect on it quite often. One is that it was being facilitated by a white cisgender male. Maybe that's okay. He was also clearly a straight man. And it was a room full of men and a few women, and the few women were sitting very close to him. And he led the conversation, and everybody nodded in the room, agreeing with him. And so what he was talking about was something that is an old trope, and I'm so sick of hearing about it, which is that I want more diversity in the workplace. And if I have a white guy, a black guy, and a woman, and they're competing against each other for a role, I'm going to go for the person who's most qualified. And it's really great if they happen to be a woman or a black man. And everyone's nodding in agreement. You're like, yeah, totally. That's exactly right. You want the best person for the job. There is a major problem with that. It's a very flawed argument, which is that we don't give people, I don't even like calling them minority groups anymore, because, we make up a large portion of this world, and I don't feel like I'm minority. But I know that this world was made for a certain sector of people, and that people is not me. And so someone has to be proactive to reach out to and work with communities and create a pipeline for diversity. It is active. This is not passive. You don't put a resume out there or a job rec out there and hope somebody bites, and great if it's a woman. Great if it's somebody who's queer. How lucky are we? Look how many women we have on our board or, at our C-suite. Now, is that because they got lucky or because you made an intentional hire so you had a diverse set of thinkers? And so I know with today and equal opportunity being, massacred at the federal level because it's not fair to, a specific demographic. How do we deal with this? How do you argue for, promoting diversity? You really, any good recruiter, any good organization, and any good CEO worth their weight in salt will specifically go after, desire, and hire a group of people that are not going to create an echo chamber. And it's hard to do. There's a lot of yes men out there. And really, you don't want such diverse thinking that nobody can come to an agreement. That is something that you suss out through a hiring process. But what you do want is somebody to go, hey, I'm hearing this even though you're not hearing this. And this is why it's problematic. And let's come up with some solutions to fix it. And that's a healthy, ecosystem. Let's think about gardening. I don't mean to boil race down into gardens, but if you want a healthy garden, you have to plant a variety of things. You have to let weeds come through. You have to let insects through, and the birds, and all of those things. And there's a balance that occurs. And so how do you seek that balance at work? How do you seek it for yourself as a leader? If you're just breaking into your career, how do you seek it? That's even harder. Like, it's one thing for a CEO to make this declaration, but as somebody who is not established in their career or in their industry, how do you create a space for yourself? And there's a lot of different ways to do it. I've started groups within my organizations that, hold on, I've got a call coming in. I started groups and organizations within my companies that are for LGBTQIA plus people, for Latines, I like to say, for women, for, you can come up with a lot of interest groups. And at first it was there as kind of like a trauma bonding, almost like, oh my God, we're in this horrible workplace that doesn't appreciate us. But now you can actually gain influence in an organization within these groups. And that is key. And so if that's something that you can kind of figure out how to begin or participate in, it's a really good way for you to understand both your value and the value of your community, but also managing up, managing through, thinking like a business-minded person. The skill you'll get from it is incredible. So anyway, I could go on and on. I have a lot of opinions about this, but I will say goodbye for now. And as usual, I'd love to hear people's experiences, their tactics for this, the way that they view it in their own ecosystem, and any questions you have, of course. Thank you.